So you want to start a podcast, but you don't know where to start. That's completely normal. I'm Jennifer Lee, and I've been a radio broadcaster for over 10 years. I started to learn podcasting back in the day, like back 10 years ago, but I didn't really fully understand it. And of course, nowadays it has changed so much and everybody's doing it. So of course you can do it as well, but these are the things that you need to know before you get started. That's why I want to tell you 7 things you need to know before you start yourself a podcast. Number 1, you are going to need equipment, because if you don't, you're not going to get very far at all. You need to be able to record your podcast onto something. You need something to record it with. You're going to need a microphone, a recording system. I know it seems overwhelming, but you're going to be able to do it, and I'm going to help you with it. But basically, you're going to also have to figure out what kind of space are you going to do this in. Are you doing this in a certain room in your house? You want to make sure it sounds good. Because the one thing I did learn in broadcasting is the fact that they always said, hey, if you have a bad video, but your audio is really good, people are more likely to continue listening. But if it's reverse and you have really great video and the audio is very poor, then people aren't going to listen. And that's the same for podcasting as well. Because you got to remember, unless you're adding a video component to your podcast, which can be done, people aren't going to listen if you can barely hear the person talking or if the audio is just really poor. So you want to make sure that you have equipment that's going to give you a good sound so your content can shine through and people are going to continue to listen. So there's a few ways you can do it. There's many different ways you can set up your podcast, which can, again, be overwhelming because you'll start Googling and looking at all the microphones and you're like, oh, what am I going to do? But don't worry, I've got you covered in the next video I'm going to do to help you figure out what type of microphone is going to work for you and what type of recording system is going to work for you. So it's nice and easy. Number 2, you're going to need a hosting platform because your podcast has to exist somewhere. So with YouTube, you upload straight to YouTube. In podcasting cases, it's a little bit different because you want to get on Spotify, you want to get on Apple Podcasts, etc. But to do that, you actually have to host your podcast somewhere. So there's many type of hosting platforms. There's some that really make it easy for you. There's one out there called Buzzsprout. And of course, you can get that for 3 months for a free trial. So you can play around with it and it will help you get onto Apple iTunes and of course, Google Podcasts and Spotify and all that. And it makes it really simple. Another way you can do it, of course, is make a website as well. And some of the websites that I will talk about, again, in another video, do have podcasting features. But you do have to place your podcast somewhere in order to get it onto some of the popular players. So again, we'll cover that because it can be another very overwhelming topic. Number 3, you are going to need a podcast thumbnail. And you're probably like, what is that? So anytime you go onto Spotify and you choose a podcast and you see that little square with the fancy artwork, well, that's your thumbnail. And you want to make sure that it looks good because you want to entice people to click on your podcast so you get lots of people listening to it. So you want to make sure it's representative of your brand. And it also has to be a very specific size because I actually ran into this problem when I was trying to submit my podcast to Apple Podcasts. It has to be between 1,400 pixels is the minimum to 3,000 pixels, which is the maximum. But that being said, I actually had to go lower than 1,400 pixels when I did my thumbnail just for Apple Podcasts. It was very, very specific on their sizing compared to Spotify and some of the other platforms. And Apple is where I ran into trouble a little bit. But once I fixed the size, I was able to get it to Apple Podcasts. So it can be a little frustrating because they all have a little bit of different requirements, but that's okay. There's a lot of great forums out there as well. And that's how I solved the problem. But that's why I wanted to let you know, because if you're having this problem, you can ask me in the comments below, because that's how I ended up solving it. But again, we'll go over in another video what type of thumbnails really make your podcast shine. Number 4, you're going to need an intro and an outro. Again, something that a lot of us don't think about. You're just like, I have this wicked podcast idea, but you need to have an intro and outro. It's a show. Each episode is a mini show. So you want to make sure, again, your intro explains exactly what your topic is, gets people hooked, and you want people to listen. Again, that is our goal, right? Nobody makes a podcast for the sake of having nobody listen to it, right? It's a lot of work that goes into podcasting. So you want to make sure people are going to listen and to continue to listen. Number 5, another one that I never really thought of until I started podcasting. So a lot of the times when you start marketing on social media, or if you do have a podcasting website and you want to showcase you podcasting, you got to take photos of yourself podcasting so people can see you in your element where you're recording. And it seems weird doing it at the time, but trust me, when you start building a website and you need photos to showcase what you're doing, you're going to be like, I get what she's saying. This might not be true for everybody, but I just think that having a few shots of you at the microphone really helps with marketing your podcast, because again, it shows that you're doing a podcast. And then of course you can have other photos to go around your topic, but it's just something that I didn't think about. And then I knew I really needed once I started to do my podcast. Number 6, editing. Really important, unless you're doing a live podcast, which is great too, because with a live podcast, you don't need editing. But some people don't feel comfortable doing it live, and that is okay. Not everybody can do it live. Recorded is fine too, because then you can get your message out there that you want to get out with your podcast. And a lot of the times, a lot more people, especially if you have guests that have never done a podcast or have never recorded before, it will make them feel way more comfortable, because the worst thing you can do is put someone live that doesn't want to be live and has never done it, because you will get somebody that looks like they're a deer in headlights, and it's not fun for you as the host either, because you can feel that that person is really nervous. So doing it as a pre-record is way better, because then you can go back and you can edit it. So if you want to edit, there are a lot of programs out there that make it super simple for like basic podcasts. I'm talking about like maybe 2 voices max, easy edits. You're just removing some breaths, you're removing some ums and all that, and you're just kind of polishing it up. If you want to get more complex, if you're going to have multiple guests recording at once, or maybe there's 3 hosts, you might want to consider an editor, because it does get a little bit more complicated, especially when you're trying to balance everyone's audio. But again, you can always ask me, what are the best tips and tricks for editing in the comment section below. And number 7, probably the most important one I'm going to say, is patience. You need patience for podcasting. It is a long road. It's like making YouTube videos as well. You want to make sure you make them good. You want to make them strong. Podcast is the same way. You want to make sure that, it's a story, a beginning, middle, and end. You want to make sure you have a great concept. You want to make sure people are going to listen to it. And it takes a long time to gain a following for a podcast as well. So you want to have patience with the equipment, because sometimes there can be technical issues. Patience goes a long way when doing this, and patience when editing, because sometimes that can also make you feel like you want to rip your hair out as well. So be kind to yourself. You got this. I know you do, and it's going to be great. Again, ask me any questions in the comment section below. Please subscribe to this channel if you want to know more about podcasting, and I will talk to you soon.